In the United States right now, there are 3 million children receiving stimulant medications for ADHD.
ADHD means?
Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. And there are about 500,000 kids in this country receiving heavy-duty antipsychotic medications. Medications such as are usually given to adult schizophrenics to regulate their hallucinations. But in this case, children are getting it to control their behaviors. So what we have is a massive social experiment of the chemical control of children's behavior with no idea of the long-term consequences of these heavy-duty antipsychotics on kids.
Part of the reason for this is that we have an oversimplified and increasingly outmoded view of the biological basis of psychiatric disorders. We tend to view them, and the popular press aids and abets this view, as chemical imbalances in the brain, as if the brain were some kind of bag of chemical soup full of dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine. This view is conditioned by the fact that many of the drugs that are prescribed to treat these disorders, like Prozac, act by globally changing brain chemistry, as if the brain were indeed a bag of chemical soup. But that can't be the answer, because these drugs actually don't work all that well. A lot of people won't take them or stop taking them because of their unpleasant side effects. These drugs have so many side effects because using them to treat a complex psychiatric disorder is a bit like trying to change your engine oil by opening a can and pouring it all over the engine block. Some of it will dribble into the right place, but a lot of it will do more harm than good.
And then the need for high levels of arousal. In a hunting-gathering world, the person who's going to be the most successful, the most likely to pass along their genes and to succeed, is the person who gets up in the morning and says, you know, it sounds like fun. Let's go out there where there's things that want to eat me as much as I want to eat them and find lunch, right? Whereas the person who's highly risk-averse, who's afraid of taking risks, that person's going to go, hey, wait a minute, there's lions and tigers and bears out there. I'm just going to sit here at the cave and starve. Okay. Now, in a farming world, you wouldn't want somebody who needs stimulation. You'd want somebody who's just perfectly content to sit on the front porch and watch the wheat grow for 7 or 8 weeks before it's time to harvest it. Because if they were easily bored, they'd say, I'm out of here. You know, I'm going to go off to the big city or something. In many cases, rather than dealing with these kids or adults with drugs, we could successfully fix their problem by changing their environment, by putting them in an environment that's more like a hunting environment rather than a farming environment, whether it's changing our schools or changing their job.
So after 22 years and 83,000 scans, the single most important lesson my colleagues and I have learned is that you can literally change people's brains. And when you do, you change their life. You are not stuck with the brain you have. You can make it better, and we can prove it. My colleagues and I performed the first and largest study on active and retired NFL players, showing high levels of damage in these players at a time when the NFL said they didn't know. But what really got us excited was the second part of the study, where we put players on a brain smart program and demonstrated that 80% of them could improve in the areas of blood flow, memory, and mood, that you are not stuck with the brain you have. You can make it better on a brain smart program. How exciting is that? I am so excited. Reversing brain damage is a very exciting new frontier, but the implications are really much wider. Here is the scan of a teenage girl who has ADHD, who is cutting herself, failing in school, and fighting with her parents. When we improved her brain, she went from D's and F's to A's and B's and was much more emotionally stable.
Right, now you created some controversy when you suggested that parental stress may contribute to ADHD and to autism.
Well, it's not may, it does. You know, like the research is not even controversial.
Okay.
It's only that.
Well, what is the research? Where does the idea come from?
The human brain development happens in relationship to the environment. In other words, which circuits in the child's brain develop and which don't properly depends on the psychological, social environment. Mm-hmm. Big study, big report in the journal Pediatrics in February this year from the Harvard Center for Child Development, that a lot of childhood disorders actually begin as coping mechanisms on the part of the child. Now, you asked about ADHD.
Yeah.
Tuning out is not a disease. Tuning out is a God-given or nature-given coping mechanism when stress is too much. Now, since the human brain develops an interaction with the environment, if the environment is stressed, how does a small child cope with it? Well, one way to cope with it is to tune out. But this happens when the brain is developing. So the tuning out becomes programmed into the brain. It's got nothing to do with a genetic disease. And the only reason it's controversial is because physicians are not taught about brain development. They're not taught about attachment. And so they don't understand these links. But the science is not controversial. It's very straightforward.